A most dangerous war took a perilous turn on Friday. In what was planned to be a brief, cordial greeting, President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy squared off in the Oval Office and left an alliance shaken. For 3 years, the West has stood against Russia's unprovoked invasion of an innocent country. Ukraine is a vanity war for Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, who covets an empire. And for that alone, more than 1 million have been killed or wounded on both sides. President Trump has boasted only he can end it quickly, but in the last 2 weeks, his chaotic attempt alarmed allies and encouraged enemies. By Friday, he was scolding the man who stands between Russia and the rest of Europe.
The story will continue in a moment.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
The meeting itself was a gamble, and the public had never seen anything like it. The president dressing down Zelenskyy, whose people had done all of the dying to stop Putin short of the border of NATO. Vladimir Putin watches the video from the Oval Office, and what does he see?
Vladimir Putin couldn't be happier, Scott, because what he sees is all of the pressure on Zelenskyy, all of the pressure on Ukraine, and no pressure on him.
H.R. McMaster knows. He was National Security Advisor in Trump's first term. He's a retired Army general, senior fellow at the conservative Hoover Institution, and a CBS News contributor. The allies look at the video from the Oval Office and see what?
What they see is something that's just confounding, a discussion that doesn't reflect the reality of the war in Ukraine, the degree to which this war is a crime against humanity. And they think, how can President Trump be berating the leader of Ukraine while he says kind things about Vladimir Putin?
We have seen those crimes against humanity in mass graves of Ukrainian civilians and in their obliterated cities. Behind a murderous front line, Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine and bombs all the rest. American-led sanctions isolated Putin, but last month, President Trump flipped U.S. policy on its head. He opened peace talks with Russia and did not invite Ukraine. At the same time, he spread a deceitful history of the war.
But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Ukraine did not start the war. Next, the president said this.
We gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's a lot.
It's $122 billion, not $350. The next day, Trump went after Zelenskyy.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction.
Zelenskyy is not a dictator. He was elected in 2019. There hasn't been a vote since because of the war. On February 24th, Trump's tilt toward Russia reached the UN, where America voted against its allies and sided with Russia and North Korea, opposing Ukraine. Alarmed, the leaders of France and Britain hurried to the White House. In these last 2 weeks, we've heard him call Zelenskyy a dictator. We've heard him say it was Ukraine that started the war. What is going on?
Well, President Trump, as we all know, has a tendency to say outlandish things. Sometimes that's to shake the situation up and create some sense of change. But oftentimes what he doesn't consider is how his words could impede his own agenda. or how his words actually can cut against U.S. interests or be received abroad in a way that's much different from the way his political supporters will receive those words in the United States. And so those words were damaging to the psyche of the Ukrainians. You know, war really is a contest of wills. And I think what you're seeing is Donald Trump delivering a series of body blows to the Ukrainians in a way that could affect, their will to continue to fight.
Zelensky's will to fight led him to push for the meeting Friday. Trump had demanded Ukraine sign over the rights to billions of dollars in mineral wealth to pay America back. Zelenskyy came to sign the deal.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have President Zelenskyy of Ukraine.
President Trump began generously.
So I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself in the sense that it's been very hard fighting, very tough fighting. They're great fighters. And you have to be very proud of them from that standpoint. But now we want to get it over with.
These public Oval Office meetings are planned for weeks with issues settled in advance, but this was hasty. Neither side was prepared. Trump spoke of loss in the war, both the victim and the aggressor.
They're not American soldiers, but they're Russian soldiers and they're Ukrainian soldiers, and we want to be able to stop it.
Zelenskyy seemed irritated when his people were equated to the invading Russians.
Whether they're in Russia or Ukraine, think of the parents of all these people being killed needlessly.
They came to our territory.
Should have never started.
Trump helped arm Zelenskyy in Trump's first term, but now he has all but cut off aid. Trump is pushing a quick ceasefire without an international guarantee of Ukraine's security, which is Russia's position too.
I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred.
Protocol prevailed for 40 minutes until Vice President J.D. Vance said diplomacy could have ended the war long ago.
The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vance had struck a nerve with a man who has buried tens of thousands of his countrymen. It got worse when Vance told Zelenskyy he'd seen Ukraine on TV. Zelenskyy explained that Putin, a mass murderer indicted for war crimes, could not be trusted. A ceasefire without a security guarantee would be naive.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
It was the White House that called in the media. Ukraine's ambassador couldn't bear to watch.
The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing.
Immediately after the meltdown, many Republicans rallied around the president, saying Zelenskyy was at fault. But Republican Congressman Don Bacon has worried about Trump's approach to Ukraine since last month.
I hope it's not as bad as it sounds.
Congressman Bacon represents Omaha. He's a retired Air Force general who knows what America means to NATO.
America's the leader of the free world. We're the indispensable power. Nobody can stand up to Russia and China if we're not a part of that. And Ukraine's the victim. And I think Putin's made clear that he wants to reestablish his old borders. And that's not in our national security interest. So to me, this is a national security issue, but also a moral issue.
Would you say that Donald Trump is appeasing Vladimir Putin?
Appears that way, though I can't get into his motives. I don't know his motives. Some people think he's doing this for negotiating and maybe help get a better deal. I don't know. All I know is what he says. And when he says that Russia is not the invader, that's Ukraine's fault, that's just wrong.
Is there danger in this?
Yep, there is. I fear what this means. We came out of World War II, the dominant power, the indispensable country for freedom. We've had NATO, and I worry that this framework is going to collapse.
When the United States sided with Russia and North Korea at the United Nations, what message did that send?
Well, the first message it sent to me was shame.
Senator Angus King is an independent from Maine, serving on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees.
I always try to think of, what's the argument on both sides? I cannot think of a rational argument for pulling our support from Ukraine.
Senator King likes to point out that Europe has given more than the U.S., and Ukraine has given the most.
They've done the dying. All they've asked for us is to send them the means to defend themselves.
In this moment, what should Congress be doing about Ukraine?
I think they have to start speaking up, because if we persist in walking away from Ukraine, it will be the greatest geopolitical mistake that this country's made since World War II.
Back in the Oval Office, President Trump revealed something of a common cause with the Russian president. Trump complained he and Putin had been slandered for years by allegations that Russia helped Trump's campaigns, allegations Trump ties to his Democratic opponents.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting.
That rant was familiar to Trump's first-term National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. McMaster left the White House after 13 months in a falling out with the president. But even back then, he was warning Trump about Vladimir Putin.
He appeals to President Trump's sense of aggrievement, right? Donald, like me, you've been treated so unfairly. And he's been very successful at it because he's a master manipulator and one of the best liars in the world.
You seem to be saying that President Trump is being played.
He is being played. And he's being played like other presidents have been played, like other leaders have been played, through that same playbook of Putin's.
Today, the Allies stood with Zelenskyy. In London, a flash summit was arranged with leaders including those of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the head of NATO, and the British Prime Minister, who announced new negotiations by Britain and France, potentially taking the lead for peace out of the hands of President Trump.
All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think?